"You're not smart enough for this company," my dad wrote on a sticky note. I rewrote their client files, let the CEO read them live, then watched everyone panic. I don't know what I expected when I first joined Telford Consulting. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I just put my head down and kept pushing, I'd prove that I wasn't just another spoiled son, another nepotism hire. But I never expected this. Never thought I'd have to endure the endless whispers behind my back, the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough, that no matter what I did, I'd always be a shadow of my father. So when I saw that sticky note, my dad's handwriting on it, clear as day, telling me I wasn't smart enough for this company, I snapped. It didn't just hit me like a slap in the face. It shattered something inside me. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. I wasn't just going to do my job. I was going to change everything. I spent the entire weekend rewriting the client files. They'd given me a stack of reports to fix, but instead of just tidying up, I dug deep, uncovered things no one had bothered to look at, redid entire strategies, and outlined new forecasts. Monday morning, I walked into that boardroom with the whole team gathered, ready for the big presentation. Donovan, the CEO, didn't expect me to present anything. He didn't even think I could handle the basic work they'd thrown at me. So I made my move. I gave the presentation of my life, live, with the CEO and every senior partner watching. And as I watched the panic spread across their faces, I knew I'd won. But I hadn't fully understood the consequences yet. I hadn't seen what that moment would set into motion. It was an early Friday morning when everything started to go wrong. I had been working at Telford Consulting for about 6 months, and though I was still new to the firm, I had already learned the unspoken rules. Keep your head down, don't ask questions, and never let anyone know you're struggling. That was what the others did, and it seemed to be working for them. But me? I didn't know how to do that. It was in my blood to push back when something felt wrong. I wasn't blind to the way I was treated. My father, Robert Walters, had been with Telford for over 20 years. His name carried weight in the industry. He was one of the senior partners, and he was known for his no-nonsense approach to business. I had always admired him, but when I started working at Telford, I quickly realized that the world he had built wasn't a welcoming one. I wasn't treated like his son. I was treated like an outsider. The senior partners barely acknowledged my presence, and when they did, it was always with that look in their eyes, the one that said I didn't belong. My father was always too busy to notice, or maybe he didn't care. "You'll never last here," I overheard one of the associates say one day while I was walking down the hallway. "He's just here because of his last name. He's never going to be good enough." It stung. At first, I thought it didn't bother me, but deep down, it was like a slow burn that refused to die out. Every time they dismissed me, every time they treated me like I was invisible, I could feel my resolve hardening. I would prove them wrong. I had to. And then came the sticky note. I was at my desk one afternoon, quietly working on a report, when I saw it. It was a small, yellow sticky note, shoved into a pile of client files. It wasn't even addressed to me directly, but it didn't matter. The words were clear, unmistakable. "You're not smart enough for this company." My father's handwriting. The shock hit me first, followed by a rush of anger that was almost uncontrollable. I knew my dad wasn't the warmest person. Heck, he didn't even know how to give compliments. But this was different. This wasn't just some random remark. It was his judgment, and it hurt. It cut through all the years of working to prove myself, working to show that I could stand on my own. It was like he had just written me off, as if nothing I did would ever be enough to earn his respect. The note stayed on my desk for days. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, couldn't bring myself to forget it. Every time I looked at it, it reminded me of everything I hated about Telford, about my father, and about the people who thought I was just a kid trying to fill shoes I would never fit. I spent the next few days in a haze of frustration. I worked even harder than usual, trying to prove myself, trying to show everyone that I could handle it. But with every report I turned in, with every meeting I attended, it became clear that no one took me seriously. The senior partners continued to overlook me. The associates continued to talk behind my back. It was as if I was invisible. Then, one morning, Donovan called me into his office. The CEO, who had known my father for years, barely looked up from his desk when I walked in. "Robert," he said, his voice cold, "I've been going over your reports. You've done well so far, but I'm afraid it's not enough. We're looking for someone who can really make an impact. Someone who doesn't just follow the rules, but who can set the bar higher. You're not there yet. I clenched my fists. I wasn't stupid. I knew what he was saying. It wasn't just a criticism of my work. It was a dismissal of who I was. I wasn't cut out for Telford, and neither was my father. I stood there, silent for a moment, letting the words sink in. And then, without thinking, I said, "Give me one more chance. Let me do something that'll change your mind." Donovan raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "What do you mean?" "I'll take the client reports. I'll rewrite them. I'll show you what I'm really capable of. You won't have to question me after that." Donovan didn't respond right away, and I could tell he was deciding whether to take me seriously or not. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. You've got the weekend. But if you fail, don't bother coming back." The door shut behind me, and I felt something stir inside me. It wasn't just determination. It was a fire. A need to prove myself, not just to Donovan, not just to the company, but to my father and to everyone who had ever doubted me. I went straight to my desk and opened up the client files. They were a mess, disorganized, incomplete, filled with outdated information. It was clear to me now that no one had really paid attention to the details. They had just gone through the motions, checked the boxes, and sent the reports out. But if I was going to show them what I was capable of, I had to do more than that. I had to dig deeper. I spent the next 2 days locked in my office, rewiring the entire presentation. I found data they hadn't even considered, identified potential risks and opportunities that no one had looked at. I created new forecasts, new strategies, and I reorganized the reports in a way that made everything look more polished, more professional, more right. I wanted to show them that I wasn't just following instructions. I wanted to prove that I had the vision to take Telford Consulting to the next level. By Sunday night, I was exhausted but confident. I knew I had done something they wouldn't be able to ignore. Monday came, and I walked into the conference room with the new files. Donovan was there, along with the senior partners. The room was filled with a tension I could almost taste. They didn't believe in me. They didn't think I had it in me. But I was about to change that. "You ready, Robert?" Donovan asked, his voice cold but expectant. I took a deep breath. "Yes," I said. "Let's go through the reports." I clicked the first slide. The room fell silent. I walked them through each section, point by point. As I spoke, I saw the looks on their faces shift, subtle at first, then more pronounced. They were paying attention. They weren't expecting this. I wasn't just presenting information. I was challenging them. I was showing them that I had the knowledge to back up my ideas. As I moved through the slides, I could see panic begin to spread across their faces. They hadn't anticipated this kind of presentation. They hadn't expected someone like me to challenge everything they thought they knew about the company. But I was just getting started. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me as I continued through the presentation. I knew they were starting to panic, even if they didn't say it out loud. The way their shoulders tightened, the quick glances between the senior partners, the way Donovan's hands fidgeted with his pen, each little sign was telling me that they were realizing something they hadn't before. They hadn't taken me seriously, not at all, and now they were forced to confront the fact that I might actually know more about the company's needs than any of them. I paused briefly at a key slide, one that I knew would strike a nerve. It was a breakdown of the client engagement strategy, showing how the existing methods had stagnated and how their performance metrics had been steadily declining for the last 3 quarters. It wasn't just a critique. It was a detailed proposal for a new approach, one I designed from the ground up. "You'll notice here," I said, pointing to the graph, "that the client retention rates have dropped in a way that wasn't addressed in the original reports. I've analyzed the data, and there's a clear pattern that indicates we're losing touch with our core clients. They feel undervalued." I let that sink in, watching as their expressions shifted from confusion to discomfort. I wasn't just pointing out their flaws. I was revealing their oversight, something they had either missed or chose to ignore. Donovan, who usually exuded confidence, now had a nervous tick in his jaw, and the other partners kept shifting in their seats. But I didn't stop there. The next slide was even more telling. Projections for the upcoming fiscal year that I had built based on real-time client feedback and internal data. Feedback they had never bothered to look at. The numbers didn't lie. I had proven that with the right adjustments, the firm could boost client retention by 25% in just 6 months, with a plan for sustainable growth that could outpace any of the competition. I wasn't just a kid with a computer anymore. I was someone who had done the homework, who had dissected their failures, and who had found solutions they never thought possible. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at Donovan. He was trying to maintain his composure, but I could see the beads of sweat forming along his brow. His grip on his pen tightened, as though he was trying to hold onto some semblance of control. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, as if the air itself had grown heavier with every passing second. The senior partners exchanged glances, and I saw them whispering under their breath, likely trying to figure out how to salvage what had just been exposed. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one more move to make. Now, about the client files, I continued, keeping my tone measured, but there was a sense of urgency building in me. I've noticed several inconsistencies in the way information was presented across different accounts. Here, I pointed to the screen again. You can see how several clients were assigned the wrong priorities based on outdated assumptions. These discrepancies were overlooked in the original reports, and they could potentially cost us millions if we don't correct them. As the words left my mouth, the room seemed to grow colder. I could feel their eyes burning into me, but I refused to falter. I knew that what I was saying wasn't just a correction. It was a revelation. The cracks in the company's carefully curated image were showing, and they weren't going to be able to brush this under the rug. I went through every account, one by one, highlighting the errors in their strategies and showing how I had adjusted them to align with what the clients actually needed, not what they thought they needed. The more I spoke, the more the partners looked like they were being backed into a corner. They had underestimated me for so long, and now they were realizing just how wrong they had been. I caught a glimpse of my father out of the corner of my eye. He was sitting there, arms crossed, his face unreadable. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw something shift. Was it recognition? A flicker of pride? Maybe, but it wasn't enough to stop the storm that was brewing. I wasn't trying to prove anything to him anymore. I wasn't trying to earn his approval. This was for me. This was about showing them all that I wasn't just Robert Walters' son. I was my own person, capable of doing things they hadn't even imagined. As the last slide flashed on the screen, I let the room sit in silence for a moment. It felt like an eternity, the tension hanging like a thick fog. But it was clear something had changed. The partners were no longer dismissing me as a naive intern. They were realizing that I had more insight into the company's issues than they did, and they were starting to panic. The first one to speak was Gregory, one of the senior partners who had been particularly dismissive of me from the start. His voice was tight, strained. "Robert, this isn't what we expected." He looked around the room, trying to find support from the others, but they were all quiet, deep in thought. "This is a lot. We don't even know if these recommendations are viable." I had expected this kind of pushback, but it didn't faze me. I knew what I had presented wasn't just sound advice. It was a lifeline for the company. If they didn't take it seriously, they were going to lose everything. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it," I said calmly, my voice now steady, unwavering. "But you're welcome to verify the data. You'll find that it holds up. The question is, will you act on it, or will you let the company continue on this path of mediocrity?" For a moment, no one said anything. Then, Donovan broke the silence. His voice was clipped, controlled, but I could hear the edge beneath it. "Robert, this isn't a game. You're not just dealing with reports and figures here. You're talking about the future of this company. You've made bold claims. Do you have the evidence to back them up?" I smiled slightly. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly, but I've backed every claim with data. You've seen it yourself." There was a long pause, and I could see the wheels turning in Donovan's head. His gaze shifted between the report in front of him and the faces of the senior partners. I could almost hear the internal debate happening in his mind, whether to accept what I'd presented or try to bury it. I could feel the tension in the room rising, and it was clear that they were running out of time to make a decision. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play, and I knew it was going to shake things up even further. I looked at Donovan, my voice soft but deliberate. "If you don't take this seriously, I'll take it to someone who will. I've seen the gaps in your leadership, Donovan. I'm not the only one who sees them. And if you want to risk everything, that's your choice. But I'm not going to sit by and let this company crumble because no one wants to face the truth." Donovan's eyes hardened at my words. I could tell that something inside him was snapping. There was a shift in the air, something almost primal. The stakes were higher now than they had ever been, and for the first time in my life, I realized that I held all the cards. The room had gone dead silent again, but this time, The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was expectant. The decision had been made. The only question left was how they were going to react. And I was ready for whatever came next. The silence in the room was thick, oppressive, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable response. I stood at the front of the room, watching Donovan, the CEO, carefully. His jaw was clenched, his eyes narrowed. He was used to being in control, and I could see the frustration building in him, knowing that he wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't going to give him the chance to sidestep this. I had laid out everything, made it clear that I wasn't some naive intern anymore. I was someone who could turn the company around, someone who knew exactly where they were failing, and now I was forcing them to acknowledge it. Donovan cleared his throat, but I could tell his composure was faltering. He looked at the senior partners, his face betraying his struggle. "You're making a bold claim, Robert," he finally said, his voice taut. "But you've yet to prove that you can actually execute these changes. We can't just jump into this without proper validation." I saw an opportunity. This was it, the last push I needed. I stepped forward, leaning against the conference table, close enough that my voice wouldn't be ignored. "Donovan, I'm not asking for your approval. I'm showing you what's been happening under your nose. For years, this company has relied on outdated strategies, and now it's beginning to show. You wanted results, and I've given you a roadmap. It's time to make a decision." I glanced around the room at the other senior partners. They were all looking at me, some with nervous glances, others with open skepticism. But I knew that their fear of the unknown was far greater than their confidence in the status quo. They were afraid of change, afraid of admitting that they had failed. And now, I was making them face it. "Robert," Gregory said, his voice shaky, "I'm not sure this is the way we want to go about this. We need to tread carefully." "No," I said firmly. "You've been treading carefully for too long. Look around you. Clients are leaving. Profits are shrinking. People are talking about the decline of Telford Consulting. The fact that no one has noticed until now is your problem, not mine." Donovan's expression darkened, but the slightest hint of doubt crept into his eyes. I could see it. He knew I was right, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. "We've been through this before, Robert," Donovan muttered, trying to regain control. "We've weathered downturns. We'll weather this one too." "I'm not talking about a downturn," I shot back. "I'm talking about a collapse. And the only thing standing between us and that collapse is whether or not you're willing to do something about it. Right now, your choices are simple. Ignore everything I've shown you and watch Telford fall apart. Or take this seriously, invest in the changes I've outlined, and build something new." The room was dead quiet again, and I could tell that Donovan was running out of excuses. I had cornered him, exposed the cracks in his leadership, and now he had no choice but to make a decision. "I'll give you 1 week," Donovan said, his voice barely above a whisper. 1 week to prove that this can work. If you can show me results, if you can demonstrate that these changes are viable, we'll move forward. But if you fail..." He trailed off, but the meaning was clear. This was his last concession. I nodded slowly, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "I'll prove it," I said. "But I expect more than just a week. I expect your commitment. If you're serious about this company's future, you'll back me up." Donovan's gaze was hard, but I saw something in his eyes shift. Maybe it was a glimmer of respect, maybe something else, but it was there. His walls were cracking. The other senior partners didn't say anything immediately, but I could tell the tide was turning. They were beginning to see that I wasn't just some kid anymore. I had shown them a way out, a path they had been too afraid to take. And now, they had to make a choice: stay in the safe, familiar failure they'd built, or take a risk and try something new. One by one, the partners spoke up. At first, their words were hesitant, but as the conversation continued, the support for my plan grew. It was clear that they didn't want to lose face, but they knew that backing me was the only way forward. When the meeting ended, it wasn't with the kind of applause I might have imagined as a kid. But there was something better: acknowledgement. I wasn't just Robert Walter's son anymore. I had become someone they needed to rely on. The next few days were a whirlwind. I got to work immediately, pulling together every resource I could, double-checking every number, every forecast. The pressure was immense. I knew that if I failed, not only would I lose my chance to prove myself, but the company could collapse in on itself. But I wasn't going to fail. I wasn't going to let them down. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had something to prove, not to my father, not to the company, but to myself. The changes I had suggested were implemented quickly. We updated client engagement strategies, reworked pricing models, and began an overhaul of the marketing strategies. It wasn't an easy fix, and there were plenty of moments when I thought things would go wrong, but I pushed through. Every decision I made, every step I took, was guided by one singular goal, not to just get by, but to change the company's trajectory. And then came the moment. A week later, we had our first meeting to review the results of the new strategies. The numbers weren't just good, they were extraordinary. Client retention had risen. Profits were up. Telford Consulting had been transformed, and it was undeniable. No one could argue with the results. Donovan called me into his office afterward. He didn't say much at first, just sat there, staring at the reports, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. It wasn't until I started to leave that he spoke up. "Robert," he said, his voice almost unreadable. "You did it. You really did it." I didn't say anything right away. I didn't need to. His words spoke volumes. They were more than just acknowledgement. They were an apology, a recognition that I wasn't just the kid who followed in his father's footsteps. I had outgrown that, and now he knew it. "I did it for the company," I said simply. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine. "Maybe I was wrong about you." And for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. My father, the man who had always treated me like an afterthought, had finally seen me for who I was, capable, strong, and deserving of more than just his name. He had underestimated me, just like everyone else, but in the end, I had proven them all wrong. Telford Consulting grew stronger in the months that followed. The changes I implemented became a new standard for the company, and my role within it was no longer questioned. As for Donovan and the senior partners, they no longer treated me like a pawn. I had earned their respect, and more importantly, I had earned my own. I had fought for my place in the world, and I had won. It wasn't just about getting back at my father or showing the company that I was more than my last name. It was about realizing my own potential, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. In the end, the lesson was clear. They had underestimated me, but I had learned one very important thing along the way. I didn't need anyone's validation to prove that I was enough.